Well, welcome to part two of my video series about the career of Steve Ditko. Now, originally, I had planned to do it all as one big video, um, and I've actually already filmed the ending of the video the last few years. But in part one, I covered the 1950s and 1960s, and so we left off covering the Charlton Ghost comics that started in 1966 with Ghostly Tales. Then in '67 was added Dr. Graves, The Many Ghosts of Dr. Graves, and Ghost Manor. And then with issue number 13 of Ghost Manor, Winnie the Witch was introduced. She became the new host. The previous host was this person right over here with the eye patch. But issue number 13, it says, "Hi creeps, I'm the new kid on the block. I'm Winnie the Witch." Special 13 issue, it says. This came out in July 1970. And it's drawn by Ditko. The opening story is. And with Winnie the Witch. Now, Ditko will later redesign Winnie the Witch. Because right now she has this white and purple costume with these glasses. He'll change her up and give her a different design. But as you can see, he's just like he did in the 1950s with Dr. Haunt and Mr. Mysterious Traveler. He kind of plays with the idea of the host, observing the events. We're seeing things through her glasses, for example, there. But he'll do it even more so in these 1970s ghost stories. Just to keep things interesting on the page, having this ghost sort of interacting with the reader almost, kind of making asides and winks and all that. It kind of gives an intimacy to the reading experience. You feel like Winnie the Witch is your friend, and Mr. Dead and Dr. Graves, they're like sort of intimates, They're, only you can see them unless they choose to be seen to one of the other characters. So there's the Winnie the Witch story. I don't think there's another Ditko one in here. I think that was the only one. But anyway, so 1970 starts off with Winnie the Witch being introduced in Ghost Manor. Now, eventually, Ghost Manor will be retitled Ghostly Haunts. So it will become her own book. There's a Ditko. This is September 1970, and there's just a little 2-pager to introduce the issue. Are You a Scorpio? And I think that's the only Ditko content, I believe, in this issue. And now here's an interesting cover. Number 16, that's obviously a Ditko cover there. An Ancient Glory. We'll take it out of the bag here. Again, there's the theme of duality in Ditko's work. The contrast of good and bad. Really nice pages here. They're nice and big. There's lots of detail. This is an underrated period of Ditko's work, probably because it's inconsistent. Sometimes I think it probably depends on the script he received, about how enthusiastic he was about it, how much he put into it, and it might have been, how much time he was able to devote to a story. Maybe the deadline was tight and he just didn't have time. So sometimes, it seems a little rushed, with these stories. But other times they just kind of blow you away. But even within the same story, these, like that page doesn't seem as exciting as that page does. It's like he started out having a lot more time, maybe, or just found the page more interesting to do. Or it just maybe turned out that way, So I'm not going to go through all these, obviously. We won't have time. But So this is number 19 of Ghost Manor. This is the last issue of Ghost Manor Volume 1, because with the next issue, it's number 20, it becomes Ghostly Haunts. And then we have number 22 there of Ghostly Haunts. And you'll see some of these covers over and over again. They'll be, reused. Right now, at this point in the early 70s, Charlton is doing all new stories and art, as they say on the front. But by the time you get to like 1977 or so, they start doing a lot of reprints, and then they end up just reusing these covers that, and stories that are only like 5 years old. This is one of my all-time favorites, because this was one of the first Charlton Ghost comics I ever read when I was like 12 years old. And somehow, I don't know how I got it. Now, this isn't my actual copy. My actual copy is in tatters somewhere, because I read it till it fell apart. But I recognized Ditko's artwork from his work at Marvel. And actually, the Ditko story isn't even my favorite in it. This Pat Boyette story is... Oh, no, you know what? There is another... I'm mixing it up with another one that I liked. Again, great. This is like, the format. You have Pat Boyette, Pete Morisi, who signed his work as Pam, sort of stylized Pam. He did great stuff. And then and Ditko, just a great team, and sometimes later on, especially, there'd be Tom Sutton and Joe Staton. But Ditko was doing work that, like this, that I don't think would have been appreciated at another company. But at Charlton, he was like a star. He was probably their top artist. He was drawing lots of covers and stuff like that. Whereas at Marvel, as we saw in part 1, he couldn't even get a Doctor Strange cover. It was, it just wasn't allowed, I guess. This is Ghostly Haunts number 25. Again, another Ditko cover. Ghostly Haunts number 26. We'll see this a specific cover reused in... Actually, we already saw it. I showed at the beginning of my previous video, I showed a Ghostly Tales. I think it was issue number 174 or 5, something like that, that reused that cover. There's another one. So as you can see, he's really doing a lot of the covers. Now, this is a Joe Staton one. This one, Partners, is very interesting because of the page layouts in it. We'll take a quick look at that one. But keep in mind, while we're looking at these Ghostly Haunts issues, Charlton is adding more and more Ghost Anthology comics to their lineup. So at the same time, you have Ghostly Haunts being... at the same time as Ghostly Haunts is being published, you have a new volume of Ghost Manor, which is hosted by Mr. Bones. You still have Ghostly Tales, Mr. Dead. You have Many Ghosts of Dr. Gray's, and then Haunted, which started out as an all Ditko comic, but eventually just, didn't. And then they kept adding more Scary Tales, Monster Hunters, Creepy Things, Midnight Tales. There was a lot. So this Partners, like I said, it's interesting the way he dispenses with panel borders, except for these tiers. The things are running together. He's not bothering to separate the action with borders in between, which is very unusual. It's an experimental. And then you have this, which is just one big panel, but starts at the top and goes across, and really only the snowflakes are kind of separating it. You can see like a reflection of a house and an eye. these reflections and stuff. You know, the eyes. There's dual personality. Again, a split theme that Ditko uses over and over again. Now this is an awesome cover. Fear has 3 dimensions. Ghostly Haunts number 30. We'll take it out of the bag. Take a look inside. You know, who says that Ditko wasn't at his peak during this period? You know, it's amazing stuff. I'll find the Ditko story in the back. Oh, it's not even a Ditko story. So he did a cover for a story that he didn't even draw. Wayne Howard drew it. So Ditko doesn't even have a story in this issue. Kind of makes you wonder, did he draw the cover first? Or was it they needed a cover and he drew it? Either way, it's a classic-looking Ditko-esque cover. And so, you know, I guess after a while he was just the cover artist. You know, so... There's issue number 37. You can see this is his redesign of Winnie the Witch. You know, so she looks more like that with a green dress. This is a Tom Sutton cover. And more Tom Sutton. So gradually they started having some other cover artists do the work. There's another Winnie the Witch picture. Eventually, Ghostly Haunts would be canceled. Let's see, this is 1975. There's another Ditko cover. This is 1975. And a little bit more. So this is a Rich Larson cover, I believe, and he has somewhat of a Ditko-esque style. I believe that this is also Rich Larson. But Ditko did the opening story, Banquo's Ghost. This one is from 1976, so this is right around near the end. You know, even though the fancy page layouts, you know, are absent, still solid drawing here. And this is really great comic storytelling. Even though it's very simple, it just draws you right in. And Charlton was such a great home for Ditko to be able to do stories like this. I think he's much more appreciated doing these types of stories. It was written by Don Glett, by the way, where he's not being compared to other people. You know, it's not like he's, you know, the latest artist drawing, you know, Fantastic Four, and people are like, oh, this doesn't look like how I want it to look. It looks like Steve Ditko. Whereas the strength of Charlton was that each of their artists had their own unique style. You saw Pat Boyette, Pete Morisi, Steve Ditko, Tom Sutton. None of them look like each other. You know, they're all very different. And so this one doesn't look like it has any Ditko work in it. Now, keep in mind, this is 1976. So Ditko had been doing work for DC at that point. So it wasn't like he was, you know, wasn't busy. But it's an all new on that one. All new, and this is a Mike Zeck coverage. Mike Zeck at the very beginning of his career. Now here's a Ditko cover, all new again. It says this is 1977. So this is around the time he was doing Shade the Changing Man for DC, which we'll look at in a bit. but it's sort of near the end of Charlton's Ghost Comics reign, which was a pretty cool reign. They were doing all new material from since 1966, with the launch of Ghostly Tales, to 1978, I think, is when they stopped doing all new material. They continued to publish comics, though, until 1985. But for the most part, from 78 to 85, they were all reprints. It's a nice drawing here. People say that Ditko doesn't draw attractive females, but if you look through these comics, it seems to me he does. So the Winnie the Witch only appears at the very beginning and end of the story. It throws a snowball at the reader, which is a little touch of Ditko whimsy. And all new Ghostly Haunts. I've had this one since I was like 12 years old. Let's see if there's any Ditko in this one. Nope, doesn't look like there is. But there is a Ditko cover on 56. Now at this point, Charlton started reprinting stuff, I believe. So this is January 78. And the way you can tell whether something is reprinted, see how it says reprinted material, copyright 1972. That doesn't mean everything in here is reprinted. You got to kind of go by the job numbers there. So this says D7828. I believe that's a newer job number. This one here is D8072, so that's a newer job number as well, I believe. I think the later ones were the 8000s. And this says D3041, so this is the reprint. It says Ghostly Haunts number 26, it looks like it says. So this is, where's that 56? Well, nope. It's like 26, yeah. So this is the reprint of Sanho Kim story. But presumably the Ditko cover is brand new, 1978. And so even though it doesn't say all new on it, sometimes you have new work buried in the comic, and you can really just have to go by job numbers. This was a fun issue, but no Ditko. And this is around the time it ended. Not sure if this is the exact final issue or not. Let's take a quick look inside, though. Yeah, no Ditko inside. But yeah, this is one of the last issues of Ghostly Haunts, which, again, had started as Ghost Manor in like 1969 or whatever. So it had a good run. Of course, at the same time, you had Dr. Graves and Ghostly Tales. This is a very well-worn issue of Dr. Graves, Many Ghosts of Dr. Graves. I've had this for years. I'm afraid to open it up out of the bag. I think there might be 2 Ditko stories in here. We'll go to the next ones. So this is number 23, Dr. Graves. Number 25. I don't have every single issue. And generally, I would just wait to get them in the cheap bins, the dollar boxes. And this is the one I was thinking of before. This was one of the first, this one and that Ghostly Haunts issue were among the first Charlton Ghost comics I ever got. And Steve Ditko drew the covers on both of them. This was the Pat Boyette story I really liked, No Smoking Allowed, where this guy his cigarette smoke is sort of punishing him, coming after him, forming into a ghost. The Borgia Stone, this is the Ditko drawn story, and it's about these unsightly hippies, who find this Borgia Stone, and they get power. So he transforms his girlfriend into a redhead, and so they're hitting the town. I mean, it's a funny story of these people who are just being so evil and so forth, and conniving, but they're a bunch of losers, and they get their just desserts. Of course, the Borgia stone is missing from the ring. At some point, they lost it. They think they still have the power, but then they've lost the ring, and now they've transformed back to hippies. And it says they're back in their miserable rut, except Lionel is now called stupid because he's always searching. Someday I may find the Borgia stone again. When I do, I'll rule the world. He's like just some tramp on the street. Interesting ending. Makes you wonder. That type of ending always makes you think, oh, what's going to happen next? I mean, that's the end of the story, but you always kind of think there might be more. You never know. He might get it back. And I don't think there's Ditko in this one. Oh, yeah, here we go. This Ghostmaster one. Now, some of these were just kind of unexciting. This one is an example of that. I just didn't think that it was that interesting. Sometimes the plots are a little illogical, too. You would read it and think, oh, this is unsatisfying. It doesn't make any sense, This one called Who's There? Sort of like that one we looked at called Partners, where he dispenses with the panel borders. So who's there? It's basically a guy just being scared in the house, and he's trying to attack whatever that sound is. So this is a nice moment where he's goes to sit down to read a book. And again, Ditko isn't using panel borders there. He just lets it happen. There's another little sequence that he does. This is interesting because we see him look at the photograph, then we see him like from the angle of the photograph, as if we are the photograph looking at him. This kind of fearful person, and then it all turns out well. It's like they were trying to. His parents, I guess, his ghosts were. They got him out of the burning house. So, sort of a logical story. It doesn't really mean anything, but it's it's an opportunity for Ditko to just go wild with the layouts and stuff. This one has a funny little intro of the painting looking down at those two, and it starts with the credits start to have the name of the signature of the artist on there, Steve Ditko, in nice big letters. This is 1973. Sort of a recognition of the importance of the artist to these comics. The painting is like responding to the tear coming out. And we're still in Dr. Graves here. I know I might be trying the patience of some viewers looking at all these ghost comics. But I think they're great. Not all of these have Ditko work in them. But there's, a ton of great Ditko work in here. Now this is a Wayne Howard cover that illustrates a Ditko story. At the very back here, death scene. sort of almost like a mystery story where the waxwork maker is able to depict these scenes before they happen. And there's the scene that had been shown earlier of the person going out the window. So this is a little longer story than usual. But it's like really well done. These are this is Ditko at his best of just telling a cool mystery story. I find some of these more satisfying actually than some of his 1950s stuff. It's more modern for one thing, because and plus he's more confident in his abilities. It's like this is Ditko, someone who's drawn thousands of pages at this point, not just a new artist. And he kind of knows what works and what doesn't, and how to tell a story, and has ideas about how to tell a story well. And so it's a mature artist at this point, although technically he's really only still in the middle of his career. Here's another Ditko cover, and again, a lot of these issues will have Ditko work, but he doesn't draw the cover. And sometimes he may draw the cover, but he doesn't have a story inside. This is for 1976. The Swamp Creature by Rich Larson. Now this one is unusual in the sense that it has some other artist has drawn the head on the front there. Is that supposed to be Dr. Graves? He looks a little too fearsome to be Dr. Graves. Which is kind of odd. They could have just used a Ditko Dr. Graves face. He's drawn so many of them. But this is a rather long story. That ends with another Dr. Graves face, but it doesn't really look like Ditko's. It looks like somebody traced a Ditko drawing. So I wonder if there had been there was maybe a different host hosting it, and they slapped a Dr. Graves on there instead. So we still have all new Dr. Graves, number 69, or no, 59. This is number 60. This is an interesting one. I really like it. It's number 62. Now the cover is just taken from inside panel inside here. So it's a Ditko cover, but he didn't draw it specifically for the issue, which is too bad because the rest of the issue is all new. This is from 1977. So again, this was around the time he was drawing Shade the Changing Man for DC. Starts out with a Pete Morisi story, which is really good. This is, I think it probably unappreciated at the time. That you were getting brand new Ditko work that was done in a great style. Dr. Graves today, old time fans would be like loving this. If they were able to just go to a store and pick up brand new issues, they had work like this in it. Whoops, we got a thing there. There's another, the duality character. And she actually she deliberately knocks over the candle and then turns into this animal. So Dr. Graves is a character in the story. He's not the host. He becomes sort of this adventure character. There's a great face. Well, that's the end. Now, after this, very next issue, in fact, this is 63, they go all reprint. Or they might not be all reprint. There might be an occasional news story in here. In fact, this story here I think is new because again you go by the job numbers. But this Cure story is an old one. So some of these are falling apart. I've had them for years. Let's see if there's any Ditko in here. The Dog Howls for You. This was one I think Bill Hall in Dickomania, the fanzine Dickomania, he was the editor of it. In the 90s, he had an issue, and I think he talked about this as being sort of like the prototypical Charlton ghost story. He was trying to think of like, what is the Charlton ghost story? And for him, it was this story, The Dog Howls for You. And so this is a reprint, but still a great issue. April 1978, cover taken from a panel inside of a, I don't have the original, I don't think. It was a, in fact, it looks like I whited out some of it. It was, I thought it was so good. I wanted, when I was younger, back in the 80s, I wanted to make photocopies of the work. So I unfortunately whited out lots of the stuff so I could lay it on the thing. But I think this is from 1968. And this is one of those stories where the ending becomes the beginning. So it starts out like this, where the book has fallen to the floor. And then you hear the story where the guy is looking for the Book of Power. He's looked all over for all of these bookstores. He finally finds it just sitting out on the shelf. He ends up killing the bookstore owner because he asked for too much money. He goes home and starts reading the incantations. He starts to fall asleep. And he's going into different dimensions. And then you have the crazy, Ditko dimension there. You get another sweeping. So this is, fresh off of Doctor Strange. Ditko is doing this work. This is 1968, and his last, Doctor Strange stuff was produced in 65, but published in 66. So he passes out, and then the book falls to the floor again. He wakes up, picks the book back up, and he repeats the process over and over again. So for the rest of his life, he's just going to be, swimming through different dimensions like that. And so Dr. Graves didn't last too much longer. 66, 68, 69. These were all reprints. And 1982, this is around when it ended. And it was revived in 1985. I'll show that later when we get to that part. But for now, that was the end of Dr. Graves. Now we have to cut back to where we left off with Ghostly Tales. This is sort of, I consider Ghostly Tales like the flagship title of the Charlton Ghost comics. And so this is like 1970. 81 is 82. Again, we start to get the Ditko covers. The Evil Eye is 84. Issue number 85. Issue number 86, another Ditko cover. This is another one. Awesome cover. Number 87. You can see the figure of Mr. Dead in a sort of outline over here in front of this character who's having sort of a Shade the Changing Man experience. It's called House of Shadows. We'll take a look at that one. This comic, it turns out, has 2 Ditko stories in it. This is the one, The House of Shadows. There's this one called The Keeper of the Cave. Very detailed looking, the side of the face with the lines on it. And then this is the one that illustrates the cover with sort of possessed man. Some wildly expressive faces there. Not as cool as the cover would suggest, though. You know, the cover, this is like really, really wild. This is the next issue, number 88, with sort of beatnik hippie flavor there. Dig This Crazy Pad, Dad is the name of that one. This is from 1971. And again, another Ditko hippies. The ghosts don't like the hippies that are occupying their house. You know, some have said, well, why would Ditko draw ghost stories like this? Oh, by the way, the ghost has become human. And that's how the story ends, where the ghosts take on human form, and then the house burns down, and then the ghosts are able to walk away happily ever after. So those are the ghosts, now human. People have asked sometimes, well, why would Ditko draw these supernatural themed stories? Isn't he an objectivist who rejects any anything supernatural or suggestion of things that are unreal? Two things to keep in mind. One is, and I've talked about this before, I think probably in a previous video. Two things to keep in mind is that this is fiction. These are sort of like metaphors. They're not. There's no suggestion that these are actually real things that are happening to real people. Everyone knows it's a story. And two, there's a sense of justice involved. The ghost is usually some sort of paranormal metaphor for the reality asserting itself and not letting contradictions stand, which is like an objectivist thing. By the way, this cover there's a double cover on this one by just printing error. This is another nice cover. So usually it's about things being righted, the evildoer being punished and the innocent being, finding happiness or finding justice, really. That one's in rough condition. This is, as an example, this is one called Answer the Phone, Dottie, about this hippie who's making harassing phone calls to various people. And there she is there. A grubby looking character. And so Ditko's able to show, he didn't write these stories, most of them anyways, but I think probably what appealed to him with these stories, if they were written by Joe Gill or, someone else, that these characters were able to be punished, for their wrongdoing. And the innocent party was able to either punish them or bring about the means by which, justice was achieved and that these people were punished. In this case, the person that she's telephoning is a witch who summons a spirit to harass her on the other end of the line. So she gets her just desserts. I don't think Ditko is saying that, oh yeah, I believe that spirits are going to come through the phone and attack you. I think he's just showing if you do wrong to people, then, you will be treated accordingly. This one's in really rough condition. Ditko cover, illustrating the Don Perlin story. The Wayne Howard. Another Ditko cover. Issue number 100 has a story called Ghost Artist in it that is really nice. If I can find it here. I thought it did. Nope, I got it wrong. Must be 101 that has Ghost Artist in it. This is a ventriloquist story. Put that back in its thing, but I would have thought it would have been Ghost Artist was 101. So this is issue number 101, which has a San-Ho Kim cover featured story, Korean folktale in English. But Ghost Artist is here, where it shows two studio mates, and one is more successful than the other. You know, one is like the junior partner in on the strip, and his mentor is on the comic strip is kind of correcting him, showing him how he ought to be inking things. And all his advice meant to help him is just irritating this guy. Like, why don't you drop dead? It's like every little thing that he's, you know, when they're staying. I wish the creep would let me open a window. It's like a greenhouse in here. And can't stand his cigarettes. He even gets all the great chicks. I'm stuck with a surplus of hags. So it's like the comic strip is the step up than comic books. So he's like, he'll be doing that lousy strip for the next 30 years. I'll be stuck in these wretched comic book jobs. But anyways, he decides to further things along and push him down the stairs to kill him. So now he's breaking the studio mate's records. You know, he doesn't have to deal with them anymore. But now he finds that his hand has a life of its own, and he's kind of stuck to the board drawing. And then when his friend comes to visit, he's found he's there permanently. And the last thing he drew was the panel that shows his guilty act. So that's a kind of example that I was talking about, the justice being served. This is one of my least favorite Charlton Ghost comics that Ditko drew, though. This particular one, Who's Next? I wrote about this in Ditkomania number 45, or no, number 50, I think it was 55, I think it was, back in 1997 or so, and how my copy has this big ink blotch on it. It's like poor printing, and it's basically about these people being terrorized by a ghost that possesses them. So each member of the family becomes, temporarily insane, attacking the other member of the family. There didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for, all this activity. It's just that people are going crazy. It's like, then the wife is attacking the husband, and then they end up moving. They sold the house, and it got demolished, and the demon apparently perished with it. Oh well. Not much there, really, it seems. Great cover on this one, Ghostly Tales number 103. And Ditko didn't draw that one. Tom Sutton drew that one. This has a Ditko-ish look, but I think it's Tom Sutton. But like I said, Ditko did draw some of the stories in these issues, even if he didn't draw the covers. But we're not going to have time to go through all of them, obviously. There were so many of them. And right now we're still on Ghostly Tales. This is number 1975. Here's a Ditko cover, number 1975, issue number 118. Another great Ditko cover, number 120, from 1976. 121, again Ditko cover. 122, again Ditko cover. I think the original artwork is like online somewhere. I remember seeing that like at Heritage Auctions or something. This is not a Ditko cover, but it's based on a Ditko story, I think. That's inside here. Homecoming by Joe Gill and Steve Ditko. When I was younger, like a teenager back in the 80s, reading this story, I thought that some of these characters should be in their own comic. By the way, this cover, these panels, these silent panels, were used as the cover of a future issue of, I think it was the Ghostly Tales, when it went all reprint and the story was reprinted. But yeah, these people who can change into animals and stuff, I thought these would be sort of like superheroes living in their little village. You know, if Charlton had ever wanted to do that, but of course with Charlton, you know, the characters appear once and they're never seen again. This is still all new, 1977. Let's see if there's Ditko inside. He did the cover. There's a totem. Yep, Dead and Gone is the name of this one. Again, some good Ditko drawing still. You know, it's a little, not very detailed, but still, you know, nice work. It's still all new, and then by this point, 1978, you'll notice it no longer says all new. There might be a couple new stories in there, but you know, now this is like reprinting old covers and stuff. There's that one cover that I showed before earlier, Ghostly Haunts cover, I think, that's been reprinted. Sometimes they'll just flop the cover, you know, it's reversed and so forth. So, you know, there's Ditko artwork in here. This is 1980. And this is a reprint of a Ditko cover, 1981, and so on. So Ghostly Tales ended up running until 1984. And I showed some of the reprinted ones before. You know, the ones, I showed some of the 1984 ones that were reprinting 1950s Ditko. There's that cover I was referring to, where they just used the panels. It's from 1983. 1983. And 162. This is a 1950s Ditko cover. Let's see if there's a reprint inside. But yeah, imagine seeing that on the stands in 1983, you know, and you're, you know, aware of who Steve Ditko is. There it says Steve Ditko. You know, you would think people would, you know, fans would be like, oh, this is of interest. But for the most part, these comics were ignored by fandom. A lot of comic shops wouldn't even bother carrying Charlton. You would see these at the spinner rack at the local 7-Eleven. So there's Dr. Haunt. That's the image from which the cover was taken. A very strange looking creature. So even back in the 50s, this is says 1957 when it says the copyrights of the reprints. So this would be a 1957 story. But even back then, he was doing those things with the hosts, integrating the hosts into the stories. You know, at least in the page layouts. And this is number 164, December 1983. And reprinting a Dr. Graves story. Or not Dr. Graves, Mr. Dead. This is like from around 1970. 165. It's from 1984. And I bought these ones when they came out at the spinner rack. In fact, let's see if this has a Ditko story inside. Oh, no, it doesn't. This is 167. So I showed some of the other ones. You know, some of my other Ghostly Tales issues in the first video that I did, part 1 of this Ditko Comics Career of Steve Ditko series of videos, when it reprinted some of the 1950s stuff. You know, before we leave Ghostly Tales and go on to Ghost Manor, I almost forgot to show this one. This is Ghostly Tales number 85 from April 1971, and it has the story The Ninth Life in it, which is a very Ditko-esque story. It's the first story in it. Now, apparently he didn't write the script, but it's very much like his creator-owned work. You see a lot of split, like contrast between good and evil. Like on one panel, you see a Earth that looks fine, and then you see a corrupt Earth on the other side of the panel. You know, there's all these contrasts, and it's about a person changing from like a failure to someone who appreciates what he has and tries to improve himself. So he sees how things are done in the past. People being put in shackles, the lack of justice in the world, and so on. So it's very inventive, you know, visually. And then finally, you know, you have this type of panel where he examines the truth of, you know, of various things, and he decides to improve himself, and then he goes off into the into happiness, you know, to the shining city. So it's very, you know, Ditko must have really enjoyed, I think, doing that story, because he was able to utilize his interests and visual interests, and you know, the contrasts of different extremes and so forth. Now, the other big Charlton Ghost anthology comic that they had, in addition to Ghostly Haunts, Dr. Graves, and Ghostly Tales, was Ghost Manor. Now, this, you know, was Ghost Manor Volume 2, because remember, Ghost Manor started in like 1969 or something and became Ghostly Haunts. So this was Volume 2, and this Ghost Manor was hosted by Mr. Bones, who is this fellow right here, the butler of the manor. And it's a nice Ditko cover there, and he illustrates the opening story. This is from 1971. That's issue number 2 of Ghost Manor. And there's a second Ditko story in here, A Touch of Genius. That's the cover featured story. So he had two Ditko stories in one issue. You know, again, in a way, these kind of all this work that Ditko was doing was pretty much ignored. In a way, it's still ignored. You know, as I think I mentioned in my previous video, you know, at some point, somebody is going to reprint, you know, these stories, and you know, you'll have a huge collection, just like with those 1950s ones that Fantagraphics have reprinted. You'll have a lot of you'll be able to see, you know, the hundreds of pages that he drew during this period. And there might be some that aren't that great, but there are some that are great. You know, there's a lot of lot there, you know. But for the most part, people haven't really even looked at some of these stories. You know, we're not going to look at this issue. We'll jump ahead to this issue number 7. This has a somewhat silly story, about these monsters riding at night. But I like this character here, this sort of green-faced, shadowy figure. He could have been a Ditko hero, like the Void or something like that. That was number 8. It's another nice cover. This is Ghost Manor number 9. Yeah, so like I said, a lot of this hasn't been reprinted. So, you always have people say, well, where could I buy these comics? And the answer is really, right now, nowhere, unless there's some print-on-demand person, just printing all these. But they would have to scan them all, unless some people probably already scanned these and they're on some dodgy website. But they're now Haunted also is so you had 5 titles at this point, and later there would be Scary Tales and others. There's number 11 of Ghost Manor. Let's see if there's Ditko inside. The voice of the victim. Like I said, I think this is work that's underappreciated. Look at these faces. But, it's one of those things when people can do something, they tend to expect, well, that's, Ditko's able to do those type of stories. So even if the art is, really interesting and cool, the lighting is really interesting, it's just, well, that's just Ditko being Ditko. After a while, people sort of take you for granted. Well, he's a great guitar player. Of course, his guitar solos are awesome, but or if you're a great piano player, well, what else can you play? These are, like I said, these are not drawn by Ditko, those covers. But here we have a Ditko cover, number 25 of Ghost Manor. Illustrating. I think this is a somewhat long story inside here, if I can find it. Move these out of the way. There's the Ditko drawn story. It's just a ghost haunting a construction site. Another Ditko cover. See if there's any Ditko inside here. Yep. Yeah, he usually has at least one story on the issues. Sometimes there's issues that go by where he doesn't, but okay, we're still all new, so this is 1977, and I don't think Ditko has work in that. Number 34, 35, 36. Now I think this story here, Crazy Jack is the name of the story. I think this one from May 1978 may be the last, if I remember right. I wrote about this on my Ditko frequently asked questions page. If you Google Ditko FAQ, my page should come up. I'll have a link below in the description though. But even though it doesn't say all new on it, I think this is the last all new Ditko story. And he drew the cover as well. So this is May 1978. So this is at the point of the DC implosion. You know, Shade the Changing Man is being canceled. And here's Crazy Jack. And you can tell, like I said, by the job numbers, this is D8292. Right there, it says it. And just about a guy with a monster in his mine. There's the monster. Well, that's the end. So that's the last of the 1970s ghost stories that Ditko did for Charlton, if I remember my facts correctly. May 1978. And Charlton then, after this point, was just all reprints. You know, for the most part, there would be occasional, non-reprinted stuff. And now they didn't even care about who's hosting it. Like, this is a reprint of a Dr. Graves story, but it's in Ghost Manor, so it's a different host. But it's just kind of like, well, they're reprinting it. They don't really care anymore. So this is 1980, issue number 51. Again, these are reprints of Ditko covers, earlier Ditko covers. This one has some non-Ditko mysterious traveler stories in it. 3 mysterious traveler stories, but they're not drawn by Ditko. They're from the 1950s. And this is issue number 60 from December 1981. Ditko cover reprinted. Number 64 from 1982. And now we're into there we go. Number 66, December 1982, reprinting a Ditko cover. And 1983. And Ghost Manor number 72, January 1984. This was one of the first Charlton comics I ever bought at the spinner rack at my local Dairy Mart. Or no, at that point it was a Lawson's convenience store. And I just decided to take a chance and start buying Charlton comics. Probably because I was bored with Marvel. So, but although there's no Ditko inside there, I think there might be like a one-pager. And this is number 74, May 1984. In the original issue of this, they had like E-Man as one of the characters, but they redid it for the reprint, so it wouldn't be E-Man. This is an interesting story, though, about a photographer who starts seeing murders take place in the photos that he's taking, and then he sees a picture of himself being seen by the murderer. So the murderer knows that he's there and he's outside his house with a gun, and so forth. This is that Shadows from Beyond cover that we saw earlier from like 1966, and it's just reprinted on here. And this one's falling apart, but it's a great issue. 76, September 1984. The covers are loose, probably because I read the issue to death, but this has The Night Was Strange, a Dr. Haunt story from like 1957. And then also has Impossible Butt at the back here, which is also has that interesting lettering as I saw in another I mentioned in my previous video, I think, with the lettering looks a little different. It's a very interesting 1950s story. All this white space, that he uses. and the short hair of the heroine, sort of reminiscent of a character like Liz Allen. It's interesting that she doesn't have like her ears don't have like lines in them. It kind of reminded me of Klaus Janson actually on Daredevil near the end of his run with Frank Miller. I think he had a similar trait of doing that. And I think this is the last issue of Ghost Manor, 1984, number 77, which again I bought when it came out. I bought pretty much any Charlton comic I saw in the stands at that point. And this is the Blue Men of Bantro from, I think, 1960. So I don't think this has been reprinted yet by Fantagraphics. But you can tell this is kind of later Ditko, or later for, it's not the 50s anymore. It's getting closer to the Spider-Man era. And you have his think symbol, or that think sign above his desk, which Ditko also had a think sign at that time, although they were very popular. Many people did, sort of inspire people to be creative. So about a comic book artist. And that's that for Ghost Manor. So the next Ghost comic that Charlton debuted was Haunted, which started out as an all Ditko comic. I don't have the first issue. The oldest one I have is number 5 from April 1972. And this one has 2 Ditko stories in it. So we had an Impy as the host on this one, by the way. That little small ghost. And Ditko did not draw that one, but he did draw this one as well. This character has sort of a Harry Osborn or Norman Osborn haircut there. So we had started out with Ghostly Tales. Then we got Dr. Graves. Then we got Ghost Manor, which became Ghostly Haunts. Then we got Ghost Manor Volume 2. And then we got Haunted. And then after that, there's like Scary Tales and Creepy Things and Monster Hunters, and Beyond the Grave, I think, is the last new one that they did. Oh, and there was also Midnight Tales too. I keep forgetting about that. That was mostly a Wayne Howard comic of characters he had created. Don't know if Ditko did. He might have done 1 or 2 stories in that. This kind of has a Ditko-ish look, but it's not. She's Waiting is the story in this one. It's like whatever you can say about Ditko's art, it's still, at this period it was really good, and expressive. It's really a shame that, later on I think it was unappreciated, at places like Marvel in the 1980s, and fandom in general. Here's an awesome cover. Let's see if there's Ditko in this one now. Nope, doesn't look like we have any Ditko in this issue. Some cool artwork though. And this is issue number 11. Obviously a Ditko cover. Ride in Darkness. This is a pretty cool, sort of like almost a gothic historical feel to it. Some of the actual drawing is just really nice. All right, and this is another cool cover. Everybody's got to die someplace. Let's take a look at that one. I can't remember what story might be in there. If there isn't even a Ditko story in here. Oh yeah, it looks like there is. The cover featured story. Pretty cool cover there. And the story looks all right. I mean, it doesn't seem like anything awesome, but let's see if there's any more Ditko in this one. Oh, yeah, we're not going to go through all of these, but 23, 24, 25, 28, a Mike Zeck cover, number 30, a Ditko cover, and 31, September 1977, but still all new. Let's see if there's any Ditko in here. Some of this later Ditko stuff is interesting to me. The later ghost stuff, I mean. You know, as Charlton is going towards the all reprints. Yeah, it doesn't look like there is. This is also all new, October 77. And no Ditko. Now we're into December 77, but the all new has disappeared. So like I said, at some points it's some reprint and some new. It's too bad they just didn't save all the new stuff and then just say all new, and you know, for ones that were reprints, just say that they were reprints. But oh well. So there's like familiar covers coming back, you know, ones that were on older issues. This looks like a Ditko cover from inside. This looks like it says reprinting the first issue of Haunted from 1971, all Ditko art. So this is in rough shape. This is from 1980, so issue number 51. And it reprints the first issue of Haunted. That's a cover that's from the inside Ditko page. Again, it's just a reprint. It's nothing new. A Dr. Graves issue of Haunted. 1981. Again, we've seen this covered before. '57, 61. Now, I believe this is a new cover. This is 1982, but not by Ditko. It's by somebody else. But they gradually started getting some fan art in, and you know, during the time when the direct sale market, the indie market, started to come around. In the early 80s, you had some fans try to submit stuff to Charlton to get it published. Like Bill Black, I think, did some Western covers for them. the publisher of AC Comics. And we'll readjust that there. Some of these writer credits, like Jack Daniels is the writer, which is no doubt a pseudonym. '67, '69. Again, these are just reprints of Ditko covers. And this is one of the issues I bought at the time, '72. I don't think it has Ditko work in it. Nope. No, this is '73. I also bought it at the time. '74 reprints Partners. That one we looked at before. And this is the final issue of Haunted. Back then I wasn't taking too much good care of these issues. I bought this when I was like 13 years old. And this is the final issue of Haunted, issue number 75, September 1984. And it reprints some older Charlton stuff, but not any Ditko, I don't believe. All right, so now we're going to take a look at Scary Tales. So Scary Tales debuted in 1974, and this is issue number 1, but this is a Modern Comics reprint of it. And unfortunately, there's no Ditko content in that issue, nor in issue number 2, October 75. Nor in this one. This is issue number 6 from 76. But this one, number 8, November 1976, does have a Ditko story in it. The lead story is drawn by Steve Ditko. And that's it right there. Oh, there's also this other story in here that's drawn by Ditko as well. So there's two Ditko stories in this issue. And then Mike Zeck's story. And then issue number 11, January 78, all new issue with a Steve Ditko cover and story. Pretty awesome cover. I mean, it doesn't look scary, does it? But it looks pretty cool nonetheless. There's Ditko's splash with the hostess Countessa von Blood, or whatever her name was. And there's the written by Nick Cuddy. And really nice artwork in here. And that's the image from which the cover was obviously taken. And that's the end. So it's really short. It's only 5 pages. And then some other non-Ditko stories in here. So that was probably one of the last Ditko stories, because it was 1978. By that point, they're closing down their operation of new material. This one has a Ditko cover. I wonder if it's a new story hidden in there. We can always find out by the job numbers. Nope, this is an old story. So Stop the Clock, D3006, or looks like. I think this is the one that mentions the Lights Out radio series. Yep. Now it's time for Lights Out. So it's, if you're a fan of old-time radio, that's pretty cool cover there, or panel there. Then we got a full page one there. that? This one has a Ditko story, I believe, inside here. Yep, there we go. Dead Fire. This, I think, may be a new story, judging by the job number and there being a high 8,000. The 8000's D8326. So I believe this may be a new story. As you notice, there's no host here. So to me, that kind of indicates a point where they don't know who's going to be, what they don't know what title it's going to be in. So there's no sense in adding a host, because if it's going to go in Scary Tales, it might go in Ghost Manor, it might go in Ghostly Tales, might go in Dr. Graves. So, and then very quickly, they're just into the all reprints. This is 1980. It's reprints of Ditko stories as well as other people. This is a 1950s cover being reprinted by Ditko. I wonder if it has any 1950s story inside. It might not. It might just have the cover. This is a Ditko story, but it's from the 70s. It's reprinted from Scary Tales because it has the hostess. And it's very expressive artwork. Very attractive artwork too. It's just very clean, and you can tell that this is an artist who knows how to put a line down on a page. He knows what he's doing. There's a confidence in it that comes through. They say that with a lot of artists, they start out with their work looking very detailed because they're trying to cover up their mistakes. Whereas as they become more proficient in their craft, they can use fewer lines. So then a lot of fans reading are like, well, their work looks a lot simpler now. It's not as detailed. I don't like it. But it's a case of the artists themselves saying the reason it's not detailed is because it doesn't need to be. I'm doing with one line what I used to do 10 lines. So. This is 1982. This is a new cover, again, not by Ditko, though. It's actually dated 1982. Mitch O'Connell, I think it is. This one is an all-new issue. They reused some submissions they had gotten from, or they used for the first time some submissions they had gotten from the canceled early 1980s Charlton Bullseye series, which printed a lot of fan submitted pieces. And my understanding was that it was all done where the fans were getting their work published in a nationally distributed magazine, but Charlton wasn't having to pay them for it. But the series was canceled after like 10 issues, and so the leftover material got in there. Now this is some old, some new. This is a Ditko-esque picture, but this is actually by Gary Cato, who has a very Ditko-esque style. And this is the first appearance of Mr. Jigsaw, who's currently still being published by Gary Cato and Ron Fortier. There's the thing of Mr. Jigsaw, again, a very Ditko-esque character. But yeah, you should look him up if you're into alternative type superheroes. And this is, I think this is the cover for, not by Ditko, but by probably by Dick Giordano or somebody like that, for the Blue Men of Bantro story that we looked at a while back, because it looks like it goes with that those characters. And Scary Tales, this is also one of the first ones I bought new, although I remember I didn't care for this issue that much. It was all right, but that's why it's still in one piece. And Scary Tales, the ones that I really liked, I read to death. All right, so that's Scary Tales. And then in 1975, they introduced Creepy Things. Let's take a look at that. See, this was a short-lived series. Let's see if there's any Ditko in here. So they were really. Oh, it doesn't look like it. They really had a thing going where the whole line of these ghost comics. They just kept adding more and more. Presumably because they were selling, and this is a modern comics reprint of Creepy Things #3, and again it has a Ditko story in it. I can never remember the name of this host. Each comic had their own host, but this title didn't last very long anyway. So, and then we have Monster Hunters, which was another one. This is issue #2. Again, it's a modern comics reprint, which has a Ditko story in it. Colonel White Shroud, I believe, was the name of the host of this one. And Baron Werewolf was the host of the Haunted. This has some interesting artwork there. And this is issue #3. What issue was that one? That was issue #2. See if there's any Ditko in there. Nope, no Ditko. And issue #6. This is one of my favorite Charlton Ghost Comics issues. It was a book-length one drawn by Mike Zeck, if I remember right. But not Ditko. Oh no, it was this one actually. This is the one I really liked. That was reprinted like Ghost Manor #71 or something like that. It was a werewolf story. And all new Monster Hunters #11. Monster Hunters #12, all new. Monster Hunters #13, but not all new. And #15, July 1978. This was either the last issue or near the last. And then finally, we had Beyond the Grave. This is from 1975, issue #2. Again, with a Ditko cover. So, they added another new series, and Ditko involved. But the funny thing is, this is issue #7 from January 1983, and they just reused the same cover, even though it wasn't that long. It's still in the same series, but it was, they didn't I don't think, put too much thought in these things. At this point, it was just kind of, we have a comic to put out, even though it's all reprints. There's another, and this is another new cover, not by Ditko, but by one of those fan artists, I believe. And this is issue #13, February 1984. Beyond the Grave was still being published when I started buying Charlton, but I never bought it new off the shelf. Either I never saw it, or the issue that I saw I just didn't care for. We'll take a quick look inside here. And it does have a Ditko story in it. The Pharaoh will roll again. But yeah, if I ever saw it, I didn't buy it. So in 1984, when this issue came out, Charlton, in mid-84, they canceled their comics line and stayed away for about a year. And then in 1985, they returned, and they brought back Dr. Graves, which had been canceled since like 1982. They kept the original numbering, so this is issue #73, and just reprints it early. I think that might be the cover of Dr. Graves #1, which I don't have. And I don't think there's any Ditko in this one. There's some Don Perlin, though. And then we have issue number 74, which reprints Ultimate Evil. Remember from way back that we already looked at. This has a little better coloring than the previous edition, I think. Pops out a little more. Yeah, I think the other edition I had was a Modern Comics reprint. So yeah, that's a great story to have. And I think, again, that's the only Ditko content in this issue. But great Ditko content to have. Tom Christopher, I think, probably drew this cover. This is a new cover for 1985. And this is an old cover, though. This is number 75, and this is the end of the line for Dr. Graves. There was Roger Broughton had in the late 80s had purchased all these photostats of the original artwork of Charlton's publications. I guess he thought he owned Charlton, and many other people thought he did too, but apparently Charlton didn't copyright their stuff properly. So he was basically just buying reproduction rights, to be able to reprint Dr. Graves. So he did come out with another Dr. Graves comic in like the early 90s under his A+ Sword and Stone publishing company. This one reprints a old Dr. Graves story that was drawn by Steve Ditko and Pat Boyette, which is an interesting combination. Obviously, Ditko must have penciled it, and Pat Boyette inked it. And that, I think, is the only Ditko content in this issue. It does have that Charlton communique that mentions the comics that they were doing. In fact, there's probably one in this issue as well that I just missed, but oh well. We'll look in the this next comic here. So they also revived Tales of the Mysterious Traveler in 1985. This was edited by Robin Snyder, and it was all Ditko, I believe. And it's reprinting old 1950s Ditko stories. Oh no, there's no Ditko in this one. No new Ditko story. This one is by Fred Carrillo, but has a Charlton, sort of their version of the Bullpen Bulletins there, talking about their latest comics, including Static, which we'll talk about in part 3 of this video. I decided, since this Charlton video is so long, that I'm going to do this as part 2 and just have it by itself. And then part 3 will pick up from there. It will be the 1970s Ditko to however long it takes to get to the end. And this one has the new Ditko story in it. Deadly Shadow is the name of it. And again, this is a 1950s Ditko reprint of a Mysterious Traveler story. And then Deadly Shadow for 1985 is brand new Steve Ditko story. Now, Ditko had intended to do more of these stories for the Mysterious Traveler, and in fact, he did a cover for it as well. But they were not published. In my next video, assuming I get through the whole video, up to the present day, there'll be a issue where you'll see the cover of that Mysterious Traveler that was never published. I think it was supposed to be the next issue. This is an odd thing where they took a Dr. Haunt story and then they sort of made him as the Mysterious Traveler instead, which is a little silly. I mean, look, they've shrunk his hat to make him look like the Mysterious Traveler, but they should have just left him alone. I don't think Dr. Haunt would have minded being in a Mysterious Traveler comic. And then finally, they had a lot more comics, so I'm not showing all of them. that came out in 1985, but they were all very short-lived. They only lasted a few issues, like 3 at most, and then they all disappeared. And those were 1985. At the end of 85, that was the end of Charlton's run in publishing comic books. But these were 2 reprint comics, although the covers were new. And one of them has a Ditko, 1950s Ditko story in it, The Hammer of Thor, which is about this person who goes into a cave and finds Thor's hammer. So, a very familiar sounding story, isn't it? But, so he uses his hammer to stop people. And this other issue, I think, didn't have that. Yeah, it had something else. It didn't have any Ditko in it. Lastly here, in the year 1999, Robin Snyder, who had been one of the last editors at Charlton and edited that Mysterious Traveler, he had put out a bunch of comics, black and white trade paperback size comics with Steve Ditko. And he had one called 160-page package, and then there was this 160-page package that came afterwards that was all Charlton ones. So I refer to it as the 160-page Charlton package to distinguish it from the other one. And there it says 20 unique stories of mystery, danger, excitement, wonder, and justice. And experience in black and white story art techniques. So Ditko wrote this himself. I assume it looks like his handwriting. And so this is, I believe, him explaining, what he thinks of the material. Excitement, wonder, justice, experience, black and white story art techniques. That's why he was doing it, I think. And, in case anyone wonders, well, how could he do this as an objectivist? And starts out with his a thing by Ditko talking about Joe Gill, and then a thing by Joe Gill talking about Steve Ditko. Actually, the Joe Gill one is here, and then the Steve Ditko talking about Joe Gill is here. It says, Joe may have been partly responsible for my... I'll get that closer. Joe may have been partly responsible for my long stay at Charlton. Actually, Charlton left us and the comic field. I know Joe's scripts made my stay in the work enjoyable and worthwhile. Our efforts are worth saving and still enjoyable in reviewing with a long list of favorites. So that shows that, Ditko enjoyed this material. And that's why he stayed, And these are all the stories. And some of these we've already looked at in their color form, like this one here, Who's There? I'm going to move this stack out of the way. There we go. So now we can see them a little better. So this is just a thick collection. Again, like we've already looked at the color versions of a lot of these stories. The original copies. There's that Dog Howls for You story that I had mentioned before that Bill Hall liked. Let's skip ahead here to some of these. This is the way Ditko was seeing the artwork too, in black and white like this. And so when he turned it in, he must have been pretty happy with it. This one has an interesting angle where there's lots of filing. It's like a file cabinet, all these little tabs all over the place. So the panels have tabs and so forth. Very inventive. The Moon Beast, that was one I liked too. I didn't show the color version of that one, but yeah, that one was a favorite of mine because of the way the artwork, the shadows and stuff. Ditko's doing a great job there. Her bulging eyes as she's terrified running. The Man Who Hated Cats. And there's that other story, Death Scene, that I mentioned before. Or what we showed before, anyway. I'm not sure if this, there's that partner story. I'm not sure if this is still available from Robin Snyder or not. You know, this was over 20 years ago that this came out. But it may be. Usually the website www.ditko.blogspot.com, Bob Here's website, will have a list of, you know, still available in print Ditko books that are available from Robin Snyder. And there we have the final panel of that. So that's that. That's my look at Ditko's 1970s Charlton ghost stories. I was going to do this part 2 covering, you know, from there, and then cover the rest of his career from the 1970s to present. But this video already is so long, and all we've gotten to is the Charlton ghost comics. So I'm going to do part 3 as the next video. We're going to pick up talking about the creator and stuff, like the Avenging World and things like that. And then get into Shade the Changing Man, the DC stuff, his return to Marvel in 1979, and then the stuff he did in the 1980s. So anyways, look forward to that, part 3 coming at some point, and hope you enjoyed this video.